So in our first four parts, we talked about how the Old Town Triad worked to get rid of the dragons and the Targaryens over the course of several generations. And because of a prophecy, they had to do it through indirect means. They couldn't take arms up against the Targaryens. Now during the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryens were tricked into fighting each other, and this almost happens again during Robert's rebellion. Aerys was suspicious that his son Rhaegar was trying to overthrow him, but the two seem to reconcile somewhat. I imagine it's because Rhaegar kidnapped Lyanna Stark. From Aerys' point of view, Rhaegar is trying to break up the Stark-Tully-Baratheon-Arryn alliance. Of course, in reality, Rhaegar is probably just trying to fulfill prophecy. The kidnapping cements the alliance rather than breaking it up. Now, Robert's Rebellion has a lot of similarities to the Dance of the Dragons, but there's one big difference. In Robert's Rebellion, the Hightowers don't field an army. Yes, the Hightowers seem to have had a hand in putting together the Stark-Tully-Baratheon-Arryn alliance, but the house itself tries to keep a low profile. The Septons, on the other hand, did play a crucial role in the war. In the Battle of the Bells at Stony Sept, they side with Robert. Keep in mind, the Battle of the Bells is the turning point of the war. It's after this battle that Ned and Robert are able to merge their forces, and the Lannisters abandon the Targaryens. Now, Harwin gives a rather incomplete version of the battle. The Mad King's men had been hunting Robert. Before they could find him, though, Lord Eddardon, your grandfather, came down on the town and stormed the walls. Lord Connington fought back fierce. They battled in the streets and alleys, even on the rooftops, and all the Septons rang their bells, so the small folk would know to lock their doors. Septons ringing bells and small folk locking doors? Why on earth would that happen? Well, we can puzzle this out. Connington's crew was going door to door searching for Robert, and then they were fighting on rooftops, so they must have had enemies up on those rooftops. Now when Arya visits the town, she sees two bowmen hiding up on the roofs. So it sounds like hidden bowmen suddenly attacked Connington. The bells were used as a coordinating signal, and the small folk locking their doors was preventing Connington's men from seeking shelter. So the Septons played a vital role in winning a battle that was a vital part of winning the war. Now it seems that Aerys had caught on to the fact that the Septons were against him, as he put wildfire underneath the Sept of Baelor. However, he hadn't caught on to the fact that the Maesters were against him, as he listens to Pycelle and he opens his gate to Tywin Lannister. But no discussion of the Hightowers would be complete without talking about Gerald Hightower. Now Gerald is commander of the Kingsguard, which means he should be fighting for the Targaryens. But then again, he's a Hightower, which means he should secretly be fighting against the Targaryens. Now it's tough to tell what Gerald is up to, as he only appears in the memories and fever dreams of Jaime and Ned. Gerald also only has 6 lines. Those lines are, "We were not there," which tells us not much at all. "Far away," or Aerys would yet sit the Iron Throne and our false brother would burn in 7 hells, which tells us that he's overly optimistic and might be religious. But not of the Kingsguard. The Kingsguard does not flee, which is interesting because this is not one of the Kingsguard vows, and fleeing might actually be the best way to protect someone. "We swore a vow, you swore a vow to guard the king, not judge him, and the king you had sworn to die for," which tells us that he's very interested in vows. Now, as I brought up in my Tower of Joy video, there is the issue of the Jaime dilemma. One's vows to one's king, one's family, and one's faith may contradict, so who wins out? Gerald comes from a very proud family of the Hightowers, which have gone to a lot of trouble to get rid of dragons and Targaryens. He comes from a very religious family, is an anointed knight, and speaks a religious line, which makes me think that he's devoted to the faith of the Seven. But then again, he's a very revered member of the Kingsguard, and speaks about the need to protect the king. Now when we think about Gerald's internal struggle, a couple of events become very interesting. Gerald is present when Rickard and Brandon Stark are executed by Aerys. In a mockery of a trial by combat, Aerys roasts Rickard alive. Now weirdly, Gerald takes Jaime aside and tells him not to judge the king. But why should Jaime care so much? The Starks were nothing to him. Now keep in mind that Jaime's been a Kingsguard for over a year at this point, so he's certainly seen Aerys act crazy before. Jaime is also not very religious, so a mockery of a trial by combat is also not that big of a deal. Jaime was actually dealing with the situation quite well. He was off in his happy place thinking of Cersei. It's Gerald who should be feeling emotional about this. Aerys just killed 2 key members of the Hightower-created marriage alliance, and he did so while mocking the gods. Then again, Rickard and Brandon were only in this mess because of Hightower trickery. Gerald is forced to watch the end result of his family's treachery. So it's rather ironic that Jaime thinks of himself in opposition to Gerald when he talks about the Jaime dilemma. In fact, Gerald is up to his neck in the friggin' Jaime dilemma. Which brings us to the Tower of Joy. Now I mentioned in my Tower of Joy video that Gerald Hightower doesn't really fit with the other two Kingsguard. Arthur Dayne is Rhaegar's best friend, so he should be there, and Oswald Went already conspired with Rhaegar to hold the Harrenhal tourney. If Gerald is loyal to the king, he should be at the Trident fighting, but if he's loyal to his family, he should be trying to stop Rhaegar. After all, Rhaegar is an abomination born of incest, trying to participate in polygamy in order to continue the Targaryen line. He represents everything against the Hightowers and the Faith of the Seven. So why is Gerald there? Has he finally had it with his family? Is he trying to help Rhaegar fulfill prophecy? Is he trying to undermine Rhaegar fulfilling prophecy? Whatever Gerald was up to, the Hightowers' efforts ended in victory. Robert became king, and the Targaryens were kicked out of Westeros. The Faith of the Seven even got a foothold in the north, with the Stark children being raised with the faith. But that's not quite the end of our story. Around the year 290, Layton Hightower freaks out and disappears into his tower. He's been there ever since. He's supposedly consulting a book of spells along with his virgin insane daughter. Of course, consulting a virgin daughter is very reminiscent of Daenerys Targaryen, the woman who foresaw the doom of Valyria. Now, it isn't certain what caused Layton's freakout, but it did happen in the wake of the Greyjoy Rebellion. Balon Greyjoy wanted to return to the old ways, and the Faith of the Seven was expelled from the Iron Isles. It should be noted that a big reason why Aegon was allowed to conquer Westeros was because he was getting rid of the Ironborn. With the dragons gone, a resurgence of the Ironborn would be a cause of concern. We're not really sure what Harren the Black was up to 300 years ago, but whatever it was, Targaryen rule was preferable to it. Now it seems the Hightowers have been active in the affairs of the Iron Islands. Baelor Blacktide was fostered in Oldtown and converted to the Faith of the Seven. The Blacktides in turn fostered Christopher Botley. Roderick Harlaw surrounded himself with Septons and studied prophecy, much like the Hightowers. Interestingly, all three of these houses supported Asha Greyjoy, the candidate for peace in the Kingsmoot. Of course, it's Euron that ends up winning the Kingsmoot, and he goes on to attack Oldtown and seek out dragons. And of course, with dragons, he'd be unstoppable in attacking Oldtown. So it seems the Hightowers' ambitions to get rid of dragons has backfired. It's only brought about the rise of the Krakens. Does Layton Hightower regret getting rid of the Targaryens? Well, it seems Layton Hightower isn't sure. His freakout shows that he's not certain his past moves have been correct, and he doesn't know where to go in the future. But it does seem that the Hightowers are keeping their options open. For example, Gunther Hightower is seen speaking to the crew of the Cinnamon Wind. And of course, the Cinnamon Wind are associates of Marwyn. And then there's the issue of Lynesse Hightower. Lynesse is the ex-wife of Jorah Mormont, who by coincidence ends up becoming Dany's right-hand man. Now, almost every aspect of Jorah and Lynesse's story seems improbable and fishy. At some point between the Greyjoy Rebellion and Layton Hightower's freakout, they all attend a tourney at Lannisport. Now, by all accounts, Jorah Mormont is not a good-looking man, but he asks for Lynesse's favor, and she gives it to him. And Jorah is not a tourney knight, but for some reason he wins the whole thing. And even though the Hightowers are way above the Mormonts, Jorah asks for Lynesse's hand, and Layton Hightower accepts. Now, every Hightower we've met so far has been hard-working and dedicated, but Lynesse acts like a spoiled brat. She insists that Jorah waste his money on jewelry, cooks, and singers, and soon he's bankrupted. Jorah decides to make some money by selling some poachers to some passing slavers. But why would there be slavers near Bear Island? Slavery is illegal in all of Westeros, so why would a slave ship head to the most remote part of Westeros to trade slaves? Even if one were picking up some choice wildling slaves or something, it would be easier to go to the eastern coast. And Jorah is caught after his first trade, which makes me think that Jorah was set up. Jorah presented himself as the most lovesick putz at the Lannisport tourney. The Hightowers may have realized that he would make the perfect stooge for whatever plans they had in the future. Lynesse's favor may even have been magical, allowing Jorah to win the tourney and become overconfident. But of course, Jorah doesn't end up as a Hightower stooge, he ends up as Illyrio's stooge, trying to win a pardon to return to Westeros. Now, I argued in my Egg of My Life video that Illyrio wasn't really supporting Dany and Viserys, that he was trying to send them to Asha. Illyrio really wanted to support Aegon, and so I argued in my Dornish Master Plan videos that Illyrio is participating in something I call the Game of the Ninepenny Kings. He wanted the City of Lice to sour to Dany's cause and support Aegon instead. Since the Prince of Lice is now with Lynesse Hightower, he would naturally not want to support a cause that involved Jorah Mormont. But I wonder if Illyrio didn't accidentally give the Hightowers massive power. Jorah says he's still in love with Lynesse, so I wonder what would happen if she asked him to steal or kill dragons. Only time will tell, and it all depends if Lord Layton the Septons and the Maesters think dragons should be in Westeros' future. Once again, I'm probably wrong about half of this, and thanks to everyone for sticking through this extra long series. And next time we'll talk about, why didn't the Qartheen just take Dany's dragons?